MODX Live Session, extending the MODX interface. So this year we already had some events. It seemed like the MODX community and the events were getting quite a lot of traction. We had the meetup in Nijmegen in January. We had the famous Switzerland retreat in Engelberg last February, which was quite fun. And we also had the Mod Expo planned for somewhere this summer, which unfortunately had to be moved to 2021 due to the current situation. But the show must go online, and we decided to take the initiative and to set up this first session online. We're hoping that this is only one of the first of many more to come. So if anyone has any ideas, feel free to, of course, organize, or if you need help with that, reach out to me and we'll see what we can do. So a small introduction to us. I'm hosting this session today. I'm Steve. I started developing with MODX in 2010. So this year is actually my 10th year anniversary. I'm natively from Malta, a tiny island just underneath Italy, and I moved to Amsterdam about 3 years ago now. And I'm leading the development team at Springbok. And my colleague Joshua Lückers will be leading this session later on how to create the extra. Joshua started with MODX in 2014. Nowadays, he's one of the core integrators and contributors to the MODX CMS project. The program for today, we're going to first, Joshua is going to highlight a data faker APO connected to xPDO to be able to populate resources and users in the MODX installation. This is especially useful when it comes to creating proof of concept projects or if you need to do testing. Then we'll move on to the showing step-by-step how to create an extra within MODX. There's been quite some questions, answers, articles recently. Today, Joshua will be showing in a more visual way on how this can be created. And at the end, we'll be taking on any questions that you may have. So I can stop sharing my screen and hand over to Joshua.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see so many people join today. As Stephen already said, I will be showing something about using fake data and how to create a simple MODX extra. So let me share my screen first. Okay, first of all, when fake data can be very useful in proof of concept projects for testing purposes, or maybe even when you want to anonymize a data set. There are various ways how to do this. For example, we can create a list of users doing it like this. Just create an array and hard code the names like semi-statical. For a few users, this is very easy. But if you want to add more users, doing it manually can take a lot of time and become really hard to do. Well, maybe we could do it another way, like creating a for loop to make it easier to generate a list of dynamic users. We run this using It will create 3 users in total at the end, as you can see. This is also, this would make it a lot easier to create a set of fake users. But let's say we want to add a field with description, and we could do it like the old-fashioned way, like I showed you earlier, like this. Add a description with some random lorem ipsum, and figure out some names ourselves, like Jane Doe, Richard Drew. 3 names is possible. Maybe a 4th name might already be harder to create something unique. Or if you want to use a for loop to do the same, it's even harder to get a dynamic description for this user. Let me show you.
Joshua, sorry to interrupt you a bit. Is it possible to increase the font size?
Oh.
And the view size, sorry.
Is this better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Let me check if this works. So as you can see, we generated 3 dynamic users using the for loop, but a dynamic description becomes much harder. Luckily, there is a library for it named Faker. With Faker, we are able to create fake data that almost looks like real data, and that's very useful. So let's include that in our project now. All you have to do is use Composer to require Faker. One second. Install it. So now add the Composer library. As you can see, let's open the README for it. Get some context. It actually makes it possible to create or to generate fake data very randomly. So let's go back to our demo. We included the Faker library. You can use the autoloader to load the classes. All we have to do to generate the same data set again as previously, but then with more dynamic data. We create a Faker factory. We call Faker name, and that will actually load fake data. So Faker factory creates a generator, and a generator, if you access one of the properties, it will look up so let me show you how this works. So let's run the script again. You can see we created an array of 10 fake users with fake data. Let's take element 4. It has a name. that looks like a real name that can be useful to use in like set to anonymize data, or the third user is Mrs. Wayland Friedberger. So this is pretty cool. This is especially useful for unit testing purposes, where you want a huge data set but don't want to create it manually. In the earlier example, we also had a description. So let's add a description that's like one paragraph of text. And all we have to do is provide a new array key with using faker paragraph. And if we run this again, you will see newly the same, a new data set with a name, a description, and a paragraph of text that's different for each element in this array. So maybe we want to make the description optional. That's also possible with Faker very easily. We just add it like this. Optional paragraph. You can even say what the default value should be when it's optional. In this case, we want a null value and the weight of many optional or empty descriptions we get. So if we run this again, let's see if we have got. So one user in this array has no description, but another has, which is pretty cool. Maybe we want to add an address to a user in our data set. It's also possible. Just do the same. Faker has a provider for addresses. Let's see what happens now. I will generate this again. As you can see, we got an address for this user. Looks like an US address. This user has another address, especially when we have specific data we want to have as fixtures. Addresses is one of the most hard things, and you could use like test street 1 and stuff like that, but it's more useful to have a fake data set that looks like real data. So the address in this case was an American address, because one of the things Faker provides is localization. So let's say we want to generate the same list of users, but then using an address that looks like a real Dutch address. All we have to do is provide the local when we create the Faker when we create Faker. So I want Dutch addresses. If we run this again, you will see an address that looks more like a Dutch address. You see the street, house number, postal code, and city. So this is pretty cool. Then we get to the next part. If you want to use this with xPDO objects, you can create the xPDO object yourself and set all the properties manually. But Faker also provides adapters for various object mappers, like the one of Symfony and Laravel. Let me show you what I mean. not work. It's my first time doing this, so okay. So yeah, we can populate entities using Faker. By default, they ship some adapters for like Procol, Doctrine 2, but not for xPDO. So that's why I created one. And let me introduce to you today the Faker xPDO override adapter. We can add it to your project, create a Faker instance again. All we have to do is add a populator, and then we can pass objects, xPDO objects like mod user, to it. So let me show you how that works in this case. So let's add the library to our project. Okay, that's that. We have it in our project. It's available using the autoloader. Before we can, before I can show you how to use it with an xPDO object, I also have to create xPDO classes, object classes. I prepared an example package already for it. So let's say we want an xPDO object named user. It has a name, a description, and address, like shown. From this schema file, we can actually generate the necessary classes. Therefore, we use a build script for this, of a schema parser script. Basically, you create a new instance of xPDO, connect with a database, tell xPDO to parse the schema file, and that's it. So if we execute this script now, we got an error. Yes, that's true, because I also need xPDO to in our and because xPDO version 2 isn't available as package on packages, we have to manually add the repository. You can forget about this. This again. Run the build script now. It's still complaining. That's out. Let's try this again. Oh wait, yeah. I also have to load the user class map loader in my composer to make sure everything loads like expected. Now, luckily I have another project where it should work, so that's awesome. So let's run the build script. As you can see, it generated a few files. like the user class.
We lost your screen.
Oh. Let me check what's going on.
Okay, we have it back.
Ah, awesome. I'm sorry. Okay, so, well, from the schema file, I have defined here from, to switch the project to my example project because it happened. So I have a user defined in the schema and a command. One user can have multiple commands. The user has a name, description, address defined, and the command has the author, which is the user, and the body with some text. We have in our build folder, I have a script that passes the schema and creates the necessary classes and files to make them usable as xPDO objects. So after running this script, it will generate these files with some information about the objects and the meta information. So that is cool. If I go back 1 second, because let me check if I can get back in the other project. So okay, so if you want to use Faker to generate the xPDO object we just created, in this case a user, we first have to instantiate xPDO. We can do it like this. I have some properties defined in my config file with some information about the database connection. In this case, I have a connection with the demo Faker database, and it's now empty. If we want to fill this database with users and commands, we first have to instantiate an xPDO object. Then we can create the object containers using xPDO's create object container functionality. And I'm pretty sure that's not going to work because it didn't work earlier. Oh yeah, I wasn't able to generate the xPDO file. So why isn't this working? So we got our files. It will actually load the user now. If I run the script again, you will see that it will crash. Oh, that's annoying. Why does this happen? Okay, give me 1 second to figure out why this isn't working in my demo. I'll be back in a bit. I'm sorry, I don't get it working. So let's move on to the second part then of the demo, where it will basically be a part of, it will also show the same example. Okay, so open. Yes, okay. Creating an extra in MODX is basically very, it can be done various ways. You can use Git package manager to do so if you want to use the manager to create the transport packages and other stuff, but you can also do it manually, which I find in the end much easier because it gives you a better understanding of how the internals of MODX work. Basically, I use the following directory structure. I have a build folder which contains directory tests. I use this folder for unit tests, which won't be a part of this webinar, maybe for another time. A transport folder with some information, with some files in it. A transport script that generates the package we can use to install the extra in MODX installation. The naming conventions I use for my directory structure are like assets, components, and the name of the extra. In this example, we call it MODX Faker. It's for the assets that are accessible in the front end or the manager. And then we have the core components and then also the name of the extra. And this contains the most important stuff. We have a folder for controllers, the elements, lexicons, the model that's generated based on the schema. We have some processes we can use with XGS in the backend. Schema folder, which will contain our schema file, a source directory to use PSR4 namespace class names. This is something I prefer, using MODX to the classes that are generated are not conform PSR4 naming conventions, but that will change when we use MODX 3. So that's why I also use the same naming conventions we can use in MODX 3 to make it easier to upgrade or make our extras available for MODX 3 once we release it. Our vendor directory, which contains our composer dependencies and the bootstrap file. In MODX 3, MODX will look in the when you create a namespace, it will look in the core part of that namespace for a bootstrap file and then execute it. What I do is for MODX tools, create also a bootstrap file, and then use a plugin that basically does, which will execute this on when MODX is initialized. This is basically almost the same behavior as in MODX 3, where in MODX 3 we won't require any plugin to load the bootstrap file. Then we have a changelog file, a copyright file, license, and a README. Those 4 files are being used also for the when you install the extra. I'll show you in a bit. So first of all, we want our extra to have a plugin. So my core components, MODX Faker elements, plugins. I created a plugin file, which basically loads the bootstrap and loads the Faker service in MODX. I've defined the service file here. This is just a simple object, and you can use MODX get service Faker to access this object. This is to make it available everywhere. So if you want to use it in a snippet, you can just use MODX Faker get service Faker, and then actually, get this configuration with some information. Our goal is to create an. I'll show you in my example. I don't have the example. No, I don't have the example. Is to create a custom manager page that's accessible through the extra menu with a button that once you click on it, asks how many resources you want to create. Let's say you want 10 fake resources. The custom manager component will call a processor that generates 10 mod resources using the Faker library and the xPDO adapter we created. Okay, so first of all, we want the Faker service to load. So we create a transport script. This file will create a transport package, which is basically a zip file, which contains all the necessary information about your extra, which you can then install using the installer. So I've defined some constants in our config file. We need an MODX installation because we are using some MODX specific classes and methods. And we define a package name, a lowercase name, which we'll actually use for some need a version and a package release. So we need a MODX package builder. We create a package with the information we have defined. We get through a namespace. This namespace contains information about the core path, where MODX is able to find it in the assets part. Then we need to define some attributes about the package. In this case, a license, a README, and a changelog, which is visible. Let me show you, for example. We download the most downloaded extra format. So let's download this one. Basically, this is downloading the zip file, and so if we install this, we get the changelog, the README, and the license, which we have defined here, which are basically these files here on the left. Okay, so then we need to add some important data. First of all, I want to create a category for our extra. Let's say we have the format package installed. It will create a new category format with all the elements that belong to it. Yeah, we want to do the same. So we have to create a vehicle and include the category information. Basically create new objects, don't save them, but using attributes, we can define what, or we can tell xPDO transport what it needs to do with all the information. So for example, we have an ID 1. Our category name is the same as our package name. We want to create a plugin for our extra. The category at one or more can have one or more plugins, which we load here, which is basically the same as this. As you can see, it has related objects. We load the plugins, we have them here. Okay, so this is our plugin, which will basically, yeah. Okay, so this is our plugin. We want to make it available in MODX. Give our plugin a nice name, our description. We can leave the category empty because we already tell it here that it belongs to the MODX Faker category. We want to use it as a static file. As you can see, I use the contents, which makes it also easier to reuse this project for new extras. If you want to use a plugin, you also have to tell which system events you want the plugin to be executed on. In this case, only on MODX unit, and it will only add the Faker services to MODX. So this is what happens here. Then we add all these files, the assets and all the other important files, and we also have to add. Because what I've defined as core path might be different from yours, yeah, we have to create a resolver. So our source core path is this. But we want to target the core path defined by the MODX core path constant. Because if you have a different core path, then yeah, we don't want to force our core naming conventions on you. Then we add all the info to the vehicle and the builder, and then actually pack will create the transport package. So if I run this, let's hope it works this time. Okay. So it has created a MODX the transport package, which I'll show you. So if you go to our MODX installation, in this case, we have a package. it has created this zip file and extracted it. Now, if you go back to our MODX installation, we go to extras, installer, because yeah, I already have the package locally available. We can search locally for the package. Yes, it's now available here. We can install it. You see the changelog readme and license file. Okay, so let's install this. We now refresh MODX. We'll see we created a new category, and there's also a new plugin available. So basically, this means if we have a snippet now, we can actually do like this. Let's have a snippet. And then, what do we have in the Vega plugin? Yeah, the config file. Just do it at dirty. This is not a good practice, but I'll just show you that it's now available. Let's do it like that. And as you can see, it has now, yeah, it shows you the config file. So this is pretty, so basically we just created an extra, very basic with a plugin.
Okay, we have a bit of a problem because Joshua's Zoom crashed. He's restarting it, so he will be back with us shortly.
Well, my Zoom application crashed, but now it still says I'm sharing my screen, which I'm not, so that's very weird. I see my screen, that's not my screen. And I can't share my screen because the other me is sharing the screen already. Okay, that's going well. Okay. I believe everything is working again. Okay, nice. Okay. So as you have seen, we created a simple plugin that makes the Faker service available to us. I remove the extra now. So if you remove the extra, that happens when during the crash. It will actually remove all the files and categories, plugins, snippets, everything you created in your package will be removed as well. Okay, so to create a custom manager page that will add a menu item with a which will then show a page with a simple button, we first have to create the menu. So we go back to our transport build script. We have to create a new file which contains the information about the menu, in which I just did in another example project. So we want to create a menu with our package name as text. In this case, we want it as parent to be components, which is basically this menu item extras. We have to define an action, in this case home. I'll come back to it in a bit, what this action is. We add a description, which is basically a lexicon key, in this case the lowercase version of our package name of MODX Faker.description. So yeah, this is just the lexicon file. It will use this to display the description of the menu. The menu index can be 0, and which namespace belongs to this menu item. And the namespace name will also be used later on, which I'll come back to later. So now we have a file with the info about the menu item. Now we also have to add it to our package, which is very easy. So we create a vehicle for our categories and all its information. We put it in our builder. We do the same for our menu. I will run this build script again. It created the package successfully. I can install the package again. And if I now refresh, let's hope that's true. It created a new menu item with MODX Faker as title and extra to demonstrate MODX Faker as description using the lexicons we have defined. So it's pretty easy to create a menu item. Now comes the hard part. So if we go to the extras, let me copy the link and paste it in here as example. So the menu item now creates a link with a query parameter A is home and namespace is MODX Faker. So basically what it will do is it will, when you open this URL, it will look for a controller named so it will look for a controller named on a pattern, which is the namespace, the action, and then manager control. It will look for this class in a file based on your core part of your extra, which is, in my case, core components MODX vehicle. Then controllers. MODX managers have teams. The only team I know is the default team. And MODX will look in a folder named after the team, which is default, and then a file named on the pattern action.class.php. I use this class alias because I want to use PSR4 conventions, and in MODX 3 we also use the PSR4 standards. So basically this is an alias to my controller, which is on my source directory. So let me close it to give you a nice overview. This is the home controller. So when we open the URL, so when we click on the menu item, it will go to the it will load this controller and retrieve the necessary information to display the page. When we initialize the custom manager page, we want the vehicle library to be available again. We add some JavaScript, which I'll come back to in a second. Load the necessary lexicon keys. Get the page title, which we want to use. Load some custom keys. Retrieve the template file, which basically is a Smarty template, and we can check permissions, which is out of the scope of this example. So when I open, let me go back to here because I don't want to show it just yet. Okay. So one of the disadvantages of using this way to package and install an extra is that you have to reinstall the package each time you do some modifications, which is not the case with Git Package Manager. I could also do a setup with Gitify to have a MODX installation in the same folder as my extra, but for this example, I was it would make it it wouldn't make it visible how easy it can be to create an extra, even if there is a lot of files. But yeah, it's just not that hard to create an extra. So let me remove the extra again. Okay, it's gone. So we package this again. I use PHP strong control R, which runs the previous script I've executed, which is pretty handy. So if we go back here. I'm pretty sure I could automate this as well, but oh well, for the time being. Let me see. Okay, so yeah, we have our custom manager page, which shows nothing now. The manager controller, in this case, my home controller, loads a template, which I have here. Because it shows basically this. So if I add some tests. Do it again. Okay. Do this another way. I added the demo as an external library, which makes it available also in PHP store here. It's also a good way to show you what happens when you have installed a package. So this is the project structure I've created for components, MODX Faker, etc. This is my installation, which you saw previously. It has the MODX Faker available here. It's also the source files. So this is the home template. Yes. So as I reload the manager page now, you can see, yeah, we just created our custom manager page. Awesome. I won't go into details about XGS and how to use it. The documentation on this subject is available on docs.modx.org, which I also use. Let me show you if I can show it to you. Basically, the info is also available here. I see it needs to be updated because some images are not loading. I want to have a button that will show you how to that will ask you how many resources you want to create. Already started making them. We have an XGS component I've named MODX Faker. I have a MODX panel. This is my I have my MODX Faker panel.home component, which is an extension of the XGS class MODX panel, which will where we define a button with a text to create fake resources, and if we click on that button, it will. This is just for demonstration purposes, so this is not the best way to do it. But so we create a button that if you click on it, it will ask you how many in a message box will ask you how many resources you want to create. You can add a number, and then it will do an AJAX request to a connector, which will have with some parameters and an action and amount. So let me go back to our controller again in our package. The wrong one. So when we initialize the custom manager page, we want to add some JavaScript that loads our XGS component, adds the Faker configuration we have available with some important path information, like we want to know where we can locate the connector which will be used in the AJAX call. Then we want to load the custom GS. Yes. So if I save this now. We see a custom manager page with a button, create fake resources, which you can see. So this is the X and the button component. And that will do an AJAX request. In MODX, you have connectors, which is basically a simple PHP file where you where you load the MODX connector by default, and then it will handle a request to a processor. Let me show you a process. And the processor is just a class that that handles response and error formatting for you. So we call our connector, which will handle the request, which loads a processor. The processor is named after the action we have defined in the parent. So in this case, it will search for a populate processor, which I have created here. And also, again, I use the class alias to use PSR4 standards. The connector will then execute the process function on the processor, which will return success or nothing. Or, which can, this will return a JSON. So we go back to, So basically, if we go to our inspect element, and if I click create processor, it will now ask me how I enter a number. We write 1. It will do a request to the connector with request data action amount, and we return a success response, and that's it. In your XGS component, you could use this response to show a success message, or if the object has a list of items, we could use it in a XGS grid or something like that. But that's not what we're going to do today. Okay, so I have my processor. And now we want to populate, we want to use the faker library to populate a few, a several amount of mod resources using fake data. I've prepared this in the upper script. Let's hope it works this time. Okay, so first of all, we need to load the faker library and the xPDO adapter we made. We have to add it as dependency. Fingers crossed. Oh, it seems to work. We want to, so when you press the button, you can give it an amount. When MODX runs a processor, it makes the parameters you provide, in this case, the amount, available using a function, this get property. We can add the default value. So if I have this, I hope this works when using XDiva. You can see that if I press X3, does it work? Of course not. you can see the amount is 3, which is cool. Okay, so I know we want to create 3 fake resources. Let's do that. Create a method. We create the faker again. We add the xPDO adapter as populator. And this is what didn't work in the previous example. This populator has a method named addEntity, and it will based on the schema file you have, like, so let me go back to the schema file of the previous. Okay. This is the schema file used by MODX to generate all the objects it has. So let's go to the okay. So mod resource has a lot of fields. For example, a page title with a database type varchar and a PHP type string. The populator will use the PHP type and database type to guess what kind of field it is, and then use the faker to get. So let me show you what I mean. Where is it? Yeah, based on the property names, it tries to guess what kind of data it should return. So if we have a timestamp, faker will return like randomly generated timestamp. So we want to add 10, or the amount given of mod resources, and once we execute the populator, it will create the objects in the database with fake data. Let me see if this actually works. And let's say 5. Yes, I know. If everything went fine, which I hope, or it didn't, it didn't. As always. Well, that's a pity. I have no idea why this doesn't work, so let's... Okay. It probably isn't able to. Yes. I have no idea what's going on. Oh, that's really annoying. Always happens when you're going live. Earlier this afternoon, today it did work, so life of a developer. So basically what it would have done was like create 10 resources that could be children or not of the parents. I have really no idea why it doesn't work. Let me try. I can't seem to get it to work, so I'm sorry about that. Well, basically that wraps up the webinar. If you want to provide the if you want to publish your extra in MODX, it's basically very easy. You go to modx.com/extras. You have to log in with your username and password. You then have a submit extra. You provided the details about your extra, which categories it belongs to. And then you simply upload your zip file with the package generated, and that's it. MODX will approve it or not, and then it will be available using the package manager of MODX. If people have any questions, now it's the time to ask.
Okay, who has questions, raise your hands and I'm going to unmute you. In the meantime, I saw there were some remarks in the chat. I see we have, hold a second, Patrick Blanc. Okay, he should be able to ask the question, Patrick.
Okay, can you hear me, right?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Hi, thank you. I was out of the room for about 2 minutes, so please don't mind if the answer has already been given, but will this presentation be available at a later point as a video?
Yes, Patrick, we are recording it, so we'll make it available later on. We'll send out an email to all participants with the link to access it. Okay,
wonderful. That was my only question right now. I have to digest what I've seen so far, and I would really appreciate to see the video to go into the details at a later point. So thank you very much for the presentation.
You're welcome. And on Slack is also a good place to ask questions later on about this webinar in general. You can direct message me or just ask in the extra or development channel. I will also make this a working example available on GitHub and with some instructions on how to do it yourself step by step.
I saw a question earlier on from Ralph de Groot. if the arbitrary name, if the names, if these are required names are arbitrary when you are showing the home.tbl, maybe I can unmute Ralph and out of talk. But I see he left.
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
I really can't remember where I saw this, but you showed a config file, and I was wondering, are those names arbitrary or are they required this way? So that would make more sense for me to understand what's specific to what you're building and what's required by MODX. So that's why I asked it about half an hour ago.
Let me check. Are you referring to the config in the build directory, this one?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. So let me show you side by side. This is our build script on the left.
Yeah.
What it actually does is loads MODX, based on the config. So we have to define the core part where MODX are located, which config key to use. So if we have MODX, so those are required because this is needed to load MODX. So in order to do this, we need this information. I've defined some other constants like the package name, the lowercase name, version, and release to have it to make it more reusable, to make the script more reusable, because when we have to build it to create a package, it needs a package name, package version, and package release.
Okay, so they are required. That was what I was wondering.
In this example, they are, but yeah, not necessarily. It makes life easier because, for example, in my Bootstrap file, I have I use the base name of the directory, which is MODX Faker, lowercase, like this, to create namespaces. If I create a new extra, I don't have to modify a lot in this file. So it's just to make it easier to have like a pattern for to make it more reusable.
Okay, I understand. Well, thanks for explaining it.
You're welcome.
And thanks for the presentation also.
Yeah, it was my first time. Next time
Looking forward
will
to
be
the second time then.
yeah. Next time will be better. And I will also have some working examples. Because the funny thing is, it did actually create a few fake resources, but I don't know why I can't get it back to work. So as you can see, it even created an alias, a publishing date based on the timestamp, which I wanted to show, which is really cool. So based on, let's get a bit deeper in this. So the page title is just a lorem ipsum, but with Faker it's also possible to create a provider. So let me show you. So in their example, they use a bug entity, and if they where is it? I always got lost in documentation. Right, yeah, we could create a custom provider for our mod resources. So when we have the page title property, it will generate a sentence instead of just some lorem ipsum, or maybe even something else. So that's pretty cool. Any other questions? How does this work?
Yep, if there are any questions, you can type them in the chat or Q&A or raise your hand and I will unmute you.
Can you, oh, okay, someone asked, can you make the customer interface without XJS from this point? Yeah, sure, because the controller, in this case, we just added some JavaScript that loads the XJS components, but it can be anything else, can be whatever you want.
Okay, then, if we don't see any more questions, thank you, Joshua, for your time. It's quite interesting. We're going to make this available and send over the link to access it after, as discussed before. And I hope everyone has a good evening. Keep safe.
Oh, I saw one suggestion from Sean Maddock about having random values for parent might have caused them to not show in the tree as well. Well, that's the cool part, because the xPDO adapter I wrote also looks for the foreign keys. So, for example, the parent. Let me see if I can get the. Let me open MODX. Equal. So we have the so this is our definition of the mod resource. The parent is defined as an aggregate, so it has what the xPDO adapter actually does is, if it detects a field that has a relationship with another object, it will actually look up the